Hey guys, PhazePlays here, bringing you an absolute banger of a league starter, Volcanic Fissure of Snaking Berserker. Fissures travel around, seeking out a nearby enemy, erupts underneath them, and then does that 3 more times. Fissures are sort of like heat-seeking damage over time minions that last a few seconds. Oddly enough, despite being a melee build, it can also function as a ranged build for extra safety. I played this build extensively early in hardcore solo self-found settlers, and easily downed all 7 Ubers. Since then, others have been copying my endgame setup. It's a fantastic all-rounder that can handle anything in the game quite comfortably, and even better, it's a blast to play. The build is fast with plenty of attack speed. It has great damage, fissures linger around for a few seconds, keeping you safe while looting. It's a speedy mapper with fantastic screen coverage. There's plenty of life leech to keep health topped off. Despite being a berserker, it's quite tanky with 6 endurance charges, fortify, and debilitate from punishment. Late game, it has the option of capping suppression for extra defense. Visual ground clarity can be an issue while bossing, especially on Exarch and Cyrus. Health degen from Berserker also limits recovery somewhat, at least until Overleech. This patch, very little is changing for the build. The Mace enchant from Settlers is gone, which is a big hit, but getting Echoes of Creation will pretty much make up for it. Ground fissures repeatedly travel underneath enemies and then erupt. Each fissure lasts a few seconds, and even automatically targets enemies. With 20% quality, each fissure erupts a total of 4 times. There's no limit to the number of active fissures. This build can comfortably attack from range without really losing any damage. Warcries are critical for the build and are what really makes it shine, granting huge damage boosts and massive area of effect. We automate 3 Warcries with auto exertion and then manually alternate pressing the other 2. One of the most important aspects of the build is cursor positioning on single target. Put your cursor near the boss, but not over the boss. In other words, your cursor needs to be right outside of the enemy's hitbox. Alternatively, the cursor can be anywhere on the opposite side of the boss. Doing this means each fissure will hit a total of 3 times. However, a red stroked outline on the boss leads to only 2 hits. Long story short, don't mouse over bosses. Prismatic Tincture is a powerful damage cooldown. Pop Warcries, activate the Tincture, and go to town. Mana Leech means you can sustain the Tincture for at least a good 10 to 15 seconds. Disable the Tincture when it's no longer needed to avoid running out of mana. For leveling in Act 1, use Ground Slam. After versatility, socket in Frostblink for extra mobility. Marauder Act 1 can be tough up until Frostblink and Leap Slam. At level 12, replace Ground Slam with Sunder, and start using Intimidating Cry on single target. Once Sunder is online, Act 2 and onwards is smooth sailing. At level 24, link Auto Exertion with Intimidating Cry and Seismic Cry if possible, then manually press Infernal Cry. Be sure to grab the Warcries Cannot Exert Travel Skills Mastery. The Snaking Gem itself can either be farmed in the first lab or in the third lab right before maps. In the third lab, consider getting Snaking to 20% quality for an additional fissure. Berserker is the Ascendancy of choice here for huge damage, attack speed, and Warcry quality of life. Warbringer helps Intimidating Cry uptime without needing to invest in Warcry cooldown reduction. Crave the Slaughter, then Rite of Ruin turn Berserker into a speedy Wrecking Ball, but be aware of health degen from Rite of Ruin. Aspect of Carnage is often taken last, just tank the downside. Easy enough. Chieftain, Berserker, and Slayer are also potential options here, but Berserker simply brings too much to the table. Here's what skill tree progression looks like. There are 2 different path of building setups in the description below. The first is the Primary PoB that covers everything from level 1 to endgame. Campaign leveling is Sunder until maps. The second only covers campaign with Volcanic Fissure of Snaking starting at the first lab. Use this if you already have the gem, happen to luck into the gem, or plan on farming it in the first lab. After campaign, always switch to the Primary PoB. Inside of Path of Building, in the Skills tab, there's skill gem progression throughout the campaign, starting with Ground Slam, Sunder. At 24, Auto Exertion. 38 adds Fist of War. And then mid-game will be Volcanic Fissure of Snaking. And then endgame setup. In the second PoB, there's skill progression for Volcanic Fissure of Snaking, which would be Ground Slam, Sunder, and then Volcanic Fissure of Snaking at level 30 or so at the first lab. And then you just play that the rest of the way. For gearing, there's an early game setup, a mid game setup, and an end game setup. Early gearing is mostly about capping res and getting some life on everything. Getting at least 2 minus mana crafts on jewelry is very important to help offset the mana cost of auto exertion. Make sure you have Warcries Cannot Exert Travel Skills crafted on a piece of jewelry somewhere. In mid game, the gear gets a bit better with more chaos res, better bases, but nothing too crazy here. The endgame tab is high-end stuff that you should aim for long-term. A lot of this is going to be very expensive to get anything near this type of stuff. Weapon will probably be crafted with a Recombinator, and then Warlord Slam the last suffix at the end. Echoes of Creation is a huge, like 80% more damage, and drops from Uber Shaper. For chest, you really want to get huge armor evasion and some physical damage reduction. Gloves are where we get our conversion, damage conversion for Trinity. For boots, you definitely want the Chill Avoid craft, and to craft these, you would use Torment Essences and hope for suppression and go from there. Yoke of Suffering is huge damage, and this drops from T17 Fortress boss. It's around a 2 or 3% drop rate. It's very rare, but this amulet's huge. Rings just resist and maybe some attributes if you need it, and then finish off with a minus mana craft. Rings are usually crafted with Harvest, Reforge, Chaos. Endgame, Stygian Belt, definitely get the Warcries Cannot Exert Travel skills here. Belt can probably be crafted with Pristine Fossils, hoping for a high T1 life and percentage life, and then go from there. Get a Veiled Chaos somewhere in there. Ghastly Eye Jewel, just get life and Shock Avoid, and then if you can get other good stats on top of that, even better. For Tincture, the Elemental Penetration mod is mandatory. This mod is absolutely enormous, and as a prefix, you want to get some sort of increased effect. There's a couple of mods here that work for prefix. Large Cluster, we want Feed the Fury, Fuel the Fight, and Martial Prowess. Craft these with Harvest, Reforge, Attack on an eye level 50 to 67 base if possible. If you want to go Suppression endgame, get 2 of these small clusters. You just need Elegant Form and 25% increased effect. Poison Chance is for Yoke of Suffering to get even more damage. Thread of Hope is optional endgame, but it synergizes very nicely with the Glorious Vanity Ahuana variant. And it lets you get potentially a lot of very, very good nodes in here inside of the Glorious Vanity here. There's tons of good nodes. It's actually pretty nuts. Light of Meaning is optional, but very, very good. Just probably throw it here most likely. There's a lot of good nodes here. You could even, if you wanted to, grab these as well. Very, very good nodes here. Medium Cluster is exerted attacks. Eye level doesn't really matter here, I don't think. I think it has to be higher than eye level 68. And you want Lead by Example and Warning Call. These are crafted with alterations, around 190 alterations each, I think. There's a couple generic jewels with some max res. You can swap these max reses with Harvest res swaps. And here's another large cluster. Early game, go pure fire by grabbing Lava Lash and one of the masteries. Late game, with access to 40% conversion gloves, swapping to Trinity becomes an option. Trinity support is a nice damage boost, and enables us to apply ailments such as Chill, Freeze, or Shock. To swap to Trinity, drop Lava Lash, swap Divine Fury to Divine Judgment, and swap out Herald of Ash for Herald of Purity. Late game, the Yoke of Suffering amulet is an enormous damage boost. It enables huge shocks on enemies, and the more ailments we apply, the more damage enemies take. This also includes bleed and poison. The ideal setup is 39% cold conversion from gloves, so that the last 1% can apply bleed and poison. Get bleed chance from a tattoo and poison chance from a jewel. The timeless jewel Glorious Vanity Ahuana variant grants Overleech, so that any life leech you have stays active even while on full life. This easily offsets any health degen from Berserker. It's a huge power spike late game and is very, very nice to have. Pairing this with a massive Thread of Hope also has enormous potential. Be sure to get an Exert medium cluster. Lead by Example grants permanent Onslaught, which frees up a flask slot, while Warning Call adds a big chunk of survivability. On average, crafting one of these takes around 190 alterations. For large cluster jewels, the notables we're after are Feed the Fury, Fuel the Fight, and Martial Prowess. These leech notables are perfect for Overleech. They're usually crafted with Harvest, Reforge, Attack. Axe and Sword clusters are slightly preferred, but Attack and Damage with Two-Handed Weapon clusters also work. Crafting on a cluster with an item level of 50 to 67 can lower the crafting cost substantially. Inside of Path of Building, be sure to check the Notes tab. There's many frequently asked questions that may provide some useful context about the build, such as gearing, playstyle, or crafting. Always be sure to have a source of Warcries Cannot Exert Travel skills, either from a Warcry Mastery or Jewelry Craft. Early game, there are 3 ways to solve Mana Leech: spending 5 or 6 points on the passive tree, or a Viridian Jewel with physical Mana Leech, or anointing Clever Thief. Endgame, a large cluster jewel with Fuel the Fight takes care of everything. For weapon bases, Karui Chopper or Volax are usually preferred. Impact Force Propagator from Heist is also a late game option if you'd like to go maces. Endurance charges automatically sustain while mapping, but early on you may need to run Enduring Cry to sustain them for bossing. Later on, any tier of the Exarch Chest Implicit that grants endurance charges every X seconds will permanently sustain them. Fist of War is powerful in the campaign and early to mid maps, especially with a slow weapon. However, as attack speed ramps, it should eventually be dropped. Suppression isn't really needed early to mid game, though it is recommended to comfortably farm uber bosses. Berserker is a great burst damage option that has the added benefit of pausing all health degen from Berserker for the entire duration. Get a Prismatic Tincture online as soon as possible, and acclimate yourself to pressing it. You won't regret it. Click like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. As always, thanks for watching.